My name is Matt Valley, and welcome to episode number 85 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast. Now, today we are doing something a little bit different. So occasionally I have an idea or somebody comes to me with an idea that just doesn't necessarily fit the typical format of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast. So I'm launching this new format, which is called Open Mic, the Rock and Roll Research Podcast Open Mic, that I can do whatever the heck I want with. So here we are. We have the first episode of Open Mic, and I'm really excited to welcome back our guest from episode number 55 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, Emmanuel Probst from Ipsos.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much for having me on the show and for reminding me it was episode 55 the last time we spoke. Today it's 85. So can I book my slot for episode 105?
Well, your math is a little off, so you might have to wait till episode 115, which would be 30. So we'll see. We'll see.
That's because I tried to trick you to come back on the show sooner.
You're testing me. I see. Okay, yeah. So last time we talked, we were talking about your book, Brand Hacks, which was great. But there's new news. So I know, Emmanuel, you have come out with a new book, and it's called Assemblage, the Art and Science of Brand Transformation. This is my own personalized copy. Nobody can try to steal it because it's signed. See, rock and roll assemblage. Onward, Emmanuel. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. It's from Idea Press Publishing, right?
That is correct. Yes, indeed.
I dug into this book. I really loved it. I learned a lot from it. I found it really fascinating. It's got some great ties to art and music, which I love. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more about it. So welcome back.
Thank you again, Matt, and thank you for your kind words about the book. And of course, I hope to inspire our community today, as it sounds like I inspired you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's get into it. It's called Assemblage. And you really kick off the book with a metaphor that I found really interesting. First of all, I learned from it. I didn't know this term, but tell us a little bit about what makes a brand manager like a maitre d', and what is a maitre d'?
Yeah, well, an assemblage is terminology that comes from winemaking or making cognac or making whiskey or bourbon. And here's what it means. When you drink whiskey, bourbon, cognac, wine, it is most of the time a combination of a wide range of brandies and of grapes. And that is what an assemblage is about. And the maître d', whom is the winemaker, to simplify for our audience, the role of this individual is to pick and choose from this wide range of different aging processes, different barrels, different grapes, and so on and so forth, combine all this into a product that is unique, that is different, yet is on brand, okay? So that you find as a consumer the taste you are accustomed to from the brand. And this is the point of the book, is to say we can build brands in a dynamic fashion, so build brands and evolve brands constantly, just like one creates an assemblage. That is, we pick and choose what is most relevant from pop culture, from science, from market research, from methodologies, and so on and so forth, to create brands that make a positive impact on people and the world they live in.
Yeah, cool. Now, when you say pick and choose, obviously, if I'm a brand manager, there are right choices and wrong choices. Some choices are better than others, let's say. Now, you use an example of a brand that we all know, a movie franchise that we've watched that really kind of drove the concept home to me. So can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, and the introduction is about James Bond, the James Bond movie franchise, which really exemplifies the concept of the assemblage. So here's the deal. James Bond's been around for about, I think, 38 movies. And the brand is consistent, whereby James Bond is still a spy and he's British, and his mission is to fight evil and to win against villains, right? To summarize it, and then he has gadgets and he gets on adventures and all that. The brand, however, has evolved over time, whereby, well, initially James Bond was fighting the KGB, and he's now fighting more of an overarching power, almost a digital evil, if you want.
Yeah.
Also, Miss Moneypenny, for example, whom is the secretary of his boss, she is Black now. In the early days, she was a very proper white British lady, very public school, if you will. What else? Q is now openly gay, which is completely fine in the new James Bond franchise. And James Bond has also evolved his relationship to women. Granted, he's still challenged, obviously, but he has evolved his relationship to women and to alcohol, and so on and so forth. That's all to say that James Bond is an inspiration because the brand is still very relevant, performs very, very well, both as a movie franchise, but also through brand partnerships. Yet it has been around for a long time. That's what an assemblage is about. What do I keep consistent? And what are the elements from pop culture, from society, from the economy that I bring into my brand to make it relevant, unique, salient to the audience?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when I read the book, I was struck by, and so let me throw this by you and see if my thinking is right. So my sense is that an assemblage is really more of a framework, and what you're conveying in the book is more of a framework than a prescription, right? So here is sort of a, here's the skeleton of what you could do, and how you build that skeleton, depends on your brand and your choices and the context and all that sort of thing. Is that a fair sort of characterization?
It is. It's a framework. It's a model. It's a method. It's exactly what you described. Is here the foundation of what you need to do to build brands that will make a positive impact on people and the world they live in. That's the transformation part. And how you are going to co-create this brand with the audience. So remember, one thing very important is 7, 9, 10, 12 years ago, as a brand strategist, you could dictate to your audience what the brand should stand for. Today, I don't care if you're okay with that or not. It's a reality of the world we live in. You are in the process of co-creating the brand with the audience. And what I mean by this is, as a marketing, market research, brand strategist, advertising professional, you may establish the foundations of the brands, the guiding principles, yet you are going to engage in a dialogue with the audience, hand over some control. You have to feel okay with this, hand over some control to your audience and co-create the brand with them. So that is what the book is about. The book is about how do I create brands for the long run, sustainable? How do I co-create these brands with the audience? And importantly, the starting point for the book, this is where we could have started, is to say brands can no longer just sell products that perform. That's a given. The functional aspect of the product is expected, it's a given. Brands must go well beyond that. They must make a positive impact on people and the world they live in. Brands must empower you, the consumer, the individual, to become who you want to be. That is what is so important in this book.
Right. And so that kind of leads into, I think, the organization of the book. So you talk about 3 distinct transformations that a brand can affect. It can transform the individual, or the individual's world, or the broader world at large. So me, my world, or the world, right? Can you talk a little bit about those distinctions?
Yeah, I really love that you read the book in so much detail, Matt. I'm not being sarcastic. I sincerely appreciate that.
It's a great book. It's a page turner, man.
So you're right. 3 3 sections in this book: me, my world, and the world. How can the brand take me from who am I to who do I want to become? So brand managers, strategists, advertisers, remember what's important is not for the brand to be the hero. It's for the brand to facilitate for your audience this transition from, again, who they are to who do they want to become, right? So that's what the me section is about. And my world, it's about my local community and what's happening around me. And the world is about the world at large. And that has to do with responsible consumerism and citizens and brands are activists, whereby brands can take a stance on key societal issues. And it has to do with upcycling and recycling and so on and so forth. So that is the structure of the book. And of course, illustrated with literally dozens of examples of brands, big and small.
Right. So let's say I'm a stodgy brand manager, right? And I didn't get the memo that consumers are in control. And I read this book, sort of encounter that framework. Where should I prioritize? Should I think first about making the individual a hero or something more contextual?
Well, you should prioritize one, take a step back and understand that your brand, most brands are not important. What's important is what they mean to people. So you take a step back by thinking, how does my audience define my brand? It is what they say it is. Keep in mind that you're immersed in your brand. You know way more about your brand than anyone else does. You over-index on everything. What's important is how do people perceive you? So the first thing you need to do is what we call at Ipsos total understanding. You really need to hear from the consumer, and not even from the consumer, but from people before being consumers. Number two, you establish the foundations of your brand, and we illustrated this with Ipsos. And the third part is you identify and you understand what are the emotional, aspirational, fulfilling dimensions your brand can bring to market. So let me take an example, say with Airbnb. Airbnb, you can book a room and you'll check in on time and the bed's going to be clean and the cleaning fee is included. Those are functional benefits that are very important. Cleanliness and access and timeliness and all this, very, very important. But those are table stakes. They are not differentiators. That's what I meant by the functional performance of the product or the service. What Airbnb does for me, it fulfills my quest for adventure and discovery and authenticity and connection to the local community. That's the sell. Because if I want a clean bed with a clean bathroom, I'll go to Marriott. They have 205,000 rooms around the world, and that's just Marriott. You can add Hilton and other chains. That's not the sell. The sell is Airbnb makes me a hero in a way, or at the very least fulfills my quest as an individual. And now I'm an adventurer. I'm going to discover, I'm going to learn, I'm going to connect with the local community. I'm going to go on an adventure. I'm going to meet someone new, and that person is the host from Airbnb, and maybe establish a connection with this individual, which with all due respect is going to be in all likelihood much more meaningful and much deeper than with whoever is checking me in at Marriott at a random hotel.
Yeah, I love that. If I think about if you have come accustomed to thinking about your brand as a collection of functional benefits, then there's this whole rich world of really understanding how the brand fits in with your users or your consumers' lives that you can take advantage of. That's cool stuff.
You're right. And empathy, if I may add, is really the key to brand building for years to come, in my opinion. We'll have plenty of social media, we'll have virtual reality, we'll have the metaverse, we'll have ChatGPT and all. In terms of quantitative data and touch points, we're completely overwhelmed. Hence, if you want to stand out as a brand, you leverage this quantitative data, you leverage those quantitative touch points to translate them into something that is unique, emotionally engaging, meaningful for your audience. You need to be intentional about it.
Right. Cool. So I want to ask you about something very specific, a quote that really stuck out to me as, wow, I never thought about it that way. So you have this chapter called The New Era of Brand Relevance. This is me trying to score points with you again, showing that I've read this carefully. Anyway, you talk about ecosystems and how powerful they can be, and then you talk about direct to consumer or DTC. And a quote is, DTC is not a channel, it's a personally and emotionally rewarding interaction. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the new era of brand relevance is to say, again, people don't shop for products in isolation. Here's what I mean, Matt. In our industry market research, we both know that for many years, we often looked at what we call competitive sets, meaning in vodka, you're going to consider Absolut versus Grey Goose versus Belvedere versus Kettle One, for example. Mm-hmm. That is not how consumers think of a vodka category. They shop based on an occasion. When you go to the liquor store, you are not going through the standard funnel of, I'm aware that I need some vodka today. What are the brands I'm going to consider? Should I consider Grey Goose versus Belvedere? Well, no, that's not the way it works. Mm-hmm. You are shopping because you're going to host a party, because you are going to host a dinner, because maybe you're going to shop this product for yourself as a precious me time, if you will, or maybe because you're going to meet with your in-laws, and so on and so forth. And depending on the occasion, you're going to shop for different products and different assortments, whereby if you host a garden party, or a backyard barbecue, if you will, you may buy some solo cups and also some beer and also some bourbon and a bottle of gin. In contrast, if you shop for a formal dinner with your in-laws, you might buy some champagne and a very nice bottle of red wine and so on and so forth. So the new era of brand relevance is to understand and to harness the fact that people don't shop for products in isolation, but people make their choices in light of the occasion and the particular needs that they associate with this occasion. And what's powerful about ecosystem brands is to provide people with a coherent set of products and services that resonates with what they need to achieve. That's what the likes of Apple does. And on a smaller scale, maybe Equinox Health Club is a good example.
Cool. So how can, I mean, if you think of a brand that's just, if you think of it just as a product, I mean, something like Apple, obviously, you know, there's the digital aspect of it. So the ecosystem element is almost a natural, right? So Amazon comes to mind as well, Microsoft. So how can, let's say something that's more traditionally tactile, a product, how can they think of an ecosystem and leverage that sort of concept?
Yeah, well, that's where brand partnerships matter.
Right.
And I'll take an easy example. I remember a success story from a few years ago, Weber Grill and Kingsford Charcoal. Mm-hmm. Meaning, if you go to Home Depot or to Lowe's or wherever you go to buy a new grill, I mean, hopefully I'm stating the obvious, but what is the shopper going to do with that grill? Well, then you will need some tools to clean the grill, and you're going to need some charcoal, and you're going to need some tumbleweed to start the charcoal, and maybe you're going to need some wood chips. And then you will look into recipes, and you could connect this also with people on YouTube providing guidance on how to smoke ribs, right? And that's exactly what I mean by this concept of an ecosystem, or the concept of the occasion. That is how you want to think of your product. And that is where brand partnerships make a lot of sense for two reasons. One, because you're going to be able to offer companion products that go well together, charcoal and a grill. And two, because often, I recommend that you go for something very quirky, a very different type of partnership that is kind of counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing so, you will access a brand new audience that wouldn't think of your brand otherwise.
Yeah.
And a good example of this is Nike and Tiffany that are about to partner on a $400 pair of sneakers. And you know what? Whether the sneakers become successful or not, that's not really the point. You know what? Worst case scenario, they'll sell for $1,200 on eBay to a bunch of sneakerheads. What's important here is for Tiffany to modernize the brand, to refresh the brand, to access a much younger audience and an audience that is way more engaged than the Audrey Hepburn type of psychographic, if you will. And conversely, for Nike, who will say no to the Robin Egg Blue on a box of anything? The Tiffany Blue, the real name for the Tiffany Blue is Robin Eggshell, I believe. That's the exact name of that blue shade.
Cool. Yeah. And this gets into some of the stuff that's really insightful, and actually where rock and roll comes into play. Say the latter half of the book, you talk a lot about the importance of art and the role of art. And so in a chapter called The Assemblage, I want to read a quote because there's another one that I really liked. I didn't read the end notes, so I don't know who Olafur Eliasson is, but I like the quote. The quote is, "Art makes the world felt, and this feeling may spur thinking, engagement, and even action." So with that said, how can brands sort of take advantage of that?
Yeah, so the book is empowering for the reader. What I mean by this, the underlying message, in fact, it's not underlying. The message is to say, you can do this, you can succeed, you can do it too. This chapter you are referring to, the assemblers, is indeed to look at the artists we admire and to say, yes, they're talented, but most of the time not in the ways we think they do. So let me illustrate. Pharrell Williams does not know how to read music. Yes, he won 13 Grammy Awards and he sold millions, if not dozens of millions of records. If you think in cooking, someone like Gordon Ramsay or Alain Ducasse, they haven't cooked for years. They operate restaurants. If you think in the arts, someone like Jeff Koons has an entire team. So did Michelangelo, so did Andy Warhol, and so on and so forth. The point is to say, these people are assemblers, whereby their talent, their skill is to orchestrate a team and to assemble, to have a vision of what's going to work, what's going to sell, and to assemble from different skill sets that they may not have. Their ability is to direct and is to have this vision. Alain Ducasse says, "I cook in my head." That's his expression. Really, it doesn't matter if Alain Ducasse is going to chop carrots or not. That's not the value. What matters is his ability to translate his artistic vision at scale. And in that way, this chapter is empowering for brand managers and brand strategists, advertising, market research professionals, is to say the real skill or the real talent is often to orchestrate, and it's definitely to assemble what is relevant to you and your audience, not always or not necessarily to do the work yourself, if you will, the work of art.
Yeah, and this was particularly insightful for me. And so if you don't mind, I kind of want to riff on something here. I've often thought, who really is the Beethoven of today or the Shakespeare of today? We think of that singular kind of genius as a creator, right? But then you introduce another name that you brought up as a master assembler is Picasso, who of course was a genius as an artist, but he did it at scale. And so much of what he produced was actually not him. It was his team, so he could be prolific, right? And I thought that was really fascinating. And I think of, and then when I think of the arts as applied to branding here, you think about those names, and it feels like the arts are sort of the pioneers and the standard bearers of the assembly
Yeah.
we can really learn from. And so then I went back to episode number 55. See, I am riffing here. I'm taking the floor here a minute. Go back to episode number 55. And you, when I asked your desert island discs, you gave me 3 names, and they're very interesting in this context. So the first one you said was Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd, genius songwriters, right? One of a kind. But the assemblage there is their music was taken and put into a new context. I'm thinking about like the late 80s when you could go to the planetarium and see, experience Pink Floyd live under the stars kind of thing. And people would smoke tons of pot and then create this totally new experience. And that really is an assemblage in a way, right? It's taking the music and putting it in a new context and creating a different kind of experience. The second one, as you said, was Tony Bennett. And just like you were talking about brands that can trade off of one another, especially ones that you would never think of together, Nike and Tiffany, Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga, right? They came together and had an immensely successful partnership that had distinct benefits for both of them, and introduced them to broader audiences, built them an element of credibility with those new audiences, that kind of thing. And then the last one, and then I'll shut up, it was Nirvana. And if I think about Nirvana, I think of Dave Grohl as really the master music assembler of this age. And what I love about him is, like, even if you don't like the Foo Fighters, even if you don't like Nirvana, most people do, but even if you don't, he has such a deep reverence and understanding for all of these other forms of music that he participates in and supports and collaborates with. He creates these new segments. I don't know if you saw him do this video with Lisa Loeb, where he played her role in that famous video for Stay, and it's immensely hilarious. And there, it brings Lisa Loeb right back into relevance. So it's really interesting. I just think about those remixes, which is language that used pretty purposefully in the book. That is purposeful, right?
Well, first, Matt, I did not remember providing those 3 records.
I'm here to remind you, man. I'm holding you to it.
I would thank you for reflecting on episode 55. I will pick the same ones today. I may add Pulp Fiction, the soundtrack, which is my favorite movie of all times. Listening to your reflection, you're making me realize that I had this book Assemblage. It's in me for a long time, because to your point, these are all great examples of assemblers, if you will. And the best illustration is that Tony Bennett Lady Gaga partnership. It's interesting because it's quirky, because it's different, but it's on brand, because Lady Gaga is a pianist. She's a true musician. She's not just like some sort of one-time wonder. She's actually a musician. And Tony Bennett is this, in my opinion, one of those great American artists, right? Just like the Rat Pack, if you know what I mean. So that's an example of a brand partnership and an assemblage assemblage that makes complete sense. And the same reasoning applies to Pink Floyd and definitely Nirvana. And then Pulp Fiction is the one assemblage that, by the way, nobody believed the movie would work because it's such a patchwork of different things, yet it's by far one of the most, if not the most successful movie from Quentin Tarantino.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this lexicon, because in those cases where, let's say it's a marketing email or a survey or having a conversation with someone or whatever, and they ask if I'm a content creator, because I have a podcast, and I've never felt comfortable saying yes to that, because I'm not creating shit. All I'm doing is telling stories. I'm not even telling the stories. I'm just bringing people on to tell the story. So I feel like I'm more of an assembler than I am a creator. And so I appreciate that language. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I'm just thinking it out loud.
Well, I agree with you. I think, look, anyone can go to Kinko's and get some business cards printed with whatever title you want on it.
Right.
And I think many people, not everyone, but many people are missing the point here, whereby, sure, claim to be a movie director if you want to, or content creator, or call yourself an influencer, that's fine. Again, just like in branding, it's not so much what you say it is what they say it is. So really the point is,
What?
does your audience relate to you as a content creator, importantly, someone bringing value to their lives, someone showing them new things they don't know? I think that's more important than one title or another.
Fair. Cool. All right. So, it is about rock and roll and research, of course, the name of the podcast. So, can you tell me, I mean, you hinted at a couple of things, couple of areas where brand managers can better understand their market, their consumers. But what are some of the implications for research as it relates to the concept of assemblage?
Yeah, well, as it pertains to the market research industry, is one work with a wider range of data. Our industry to this day relies a lot, not solely, but a lot on qualitative, quantitative research. There is nothing wrong with this, but I'm saying there are so many other data sources you should consider. Of course, social media listening is one, but think also about news monitoring. Think also about academic publications, legislative publications, news signal, and so on and so forth. So in my opinion, or in my assessment, the way the market research industry should evolve is, number one, by integrating a wider range of data. Number two, leveraging artificial intelligence and technologies to make sense of that data at scale. And the third thing I will say is the industry should not just measure performance in hindsight. In other words, it's not that important in January, February, March to reflect on how we performed at Black Friday. The opportunity for the industry is to also predict and optimize the performance of the brands and products of our clients.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So I realize I've sort of guided the discussion here via the questions that I have. Want to leave any room here for maybe some topic or angle of the book that I have not covered that you'd like to share?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I'm reflecting on my own book now. I think what's important is the key takeaway is now it is your turn. You can do it too. And this book shows you how. And what this means is you don't have to have 30 years experience. You can make a very significant, often a more significant contribution if you're 6 months out of college. What's important is to have a voice and to voice your ideas and to contribute in that way. People will steal your ideas, and that's completely fine, because the way you differentiate is you have more ideas than anyone else, right? So if you're 22 out of college and you're starting in the market research, advertising, branding industry, and you show up at a meeting, you give out an idea and your boss is going to steal it, well, that's unpleasant, but your strength is to get ahead with 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 new ideas for the next 2 or 3 meetings you're going to be part of.
Right.
Keep in mind that do not be intimidated. Keep in mind that you know more about social media, about pop culture, about what is trending and what not, if you're 22 than if you've been in the industry for 30 years. So the book is empowering. The book is to provide you with a set of ideas that you can implement to grow brands. And you can do this whether you've been in the industry for 30 years and you're guiding multi-million-dollar brands, or if you've been in the industry for 6 months and you aim to be smarter and to come across as smarter in that meeting.
Great. Excellent. Well, I was going to close by asking you if you've rethought your desert island disc question, which you've already answered. So I'm just going to finish by asking you, what is it about Slayer that after all these years, they are still the best metal band of all time? What is it?
You know, I cannot help bring this back to the book as well. We could think of Iron Maiden as well. The strength is those are evergreens. And again, I think that's really the difference between getting 25,000 likes on social media this morning and then you're no one tomorrow. That's not the point. The point is to have ideas, creations, music, art, brands that last over time, if you will. Yeah. And frankly, that's how my writing is structured, meaning I wrote Brand Hacks in 2018 before we even knew what COVID was about. And the book is just as relevant, if not more relevant today.
Absolutely.
I wrote Assemblage, obviously a year ago now. And again, the book is going to be as relevant, if not more relevant, for the next 3 to 4 years. Hence the importance of reading the book today. But the short answer to your question, back to Slayer, back to the likes of Pink Floyd, is that's the quality of the art and we can reflect on Picasso as well, and most recently on Jeff Koons. This is art that lasts because it is not an overnight success. It is a long-term artistic vision of what people will like and what people will want and need.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, next time we get together, I'll play some Slayer and I'll tell you my answer to that question, and we'll take it. Anyway, hey, this has been a great chat. Once again, the book is Assemblage. Really excellent book from Idea Press. Thank you for the privilege of reading this. Appreciate the personalized copy. Let's definitely stay in touch, Emmanuel, and rock and roll.
Rock and roll. Thank you, man.